This is Leisha Holmes, and I am your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome to our channel today somebody who, this is not a novice experience for him, actually. Apparently, in his spare time, he's a bit of a radio DJ, but we'll get to know a little bit more about him as we get to have a conversation about all sorts of things today. So without further ado, this is Rob Pollington, who is a director at CPL Technology. Welcome to you today, Rob. How are you?
Hey, Leisha, how you doing? I'm very well indeed. Thank you so much for having us on the podcast today. Real pleasure.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. So for those who are not yet familiar with you, and maybe might even be more interested in the radio side than the actual recruitment side, but, you know, let's contextualize
That's the weekend. That's the weekend
That's
thing.
a weekend thing. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what the business does.
So how you doing, guys? So I'm Rob Pollington. I'm a director here at CPL Technology. We are a recruitment, global transformational recruitment business of 30 years. I look after the Ntrinsic team. So we've gone through some pretty magnificent changes in like the last 3 months where we've hubbed and merged two of our recruitment businesses together to now drive forward the Ntrinsic brand for next year and beyond. So Ntrinsic itself is an organization which had a specialism, particularly in Oracle ERP recruitment from sort of 2006, brought into the OSI group. OSI owns CPL as well. So my team being specialist talent, very much focused towards software engineering, particularly technical engineering as well. Through this merger, we can now offer our clients even more. So we kind of branched out much more now into cybersecurity, which is always something that Ntrinsic's done really well. The ERP piece itself, we've broadened because some of the guys on my side of the team have got backgrounds in SAP and what have you. So from a client perspective and what we can offer service-wise, a heck of a lot more, but really exciting. So been lots of, what do they say, storming and norming, or just kind of just getting together and getting to know each other really properly, just between
I was going to say,
teams.
I mean, before we sort of crack on with what we're going to talk about today, there will be people listening that will either have gone through or potentially may go through a merger or even an acquisition. But, you know, let's talk about it in terms of what would you say has been, from a journey perspective, how do you ensure that you do integrate cultures, and how do you ensure that you make it as smooth as possible for both your employees, you know, the team, but also the customers, because you've got internal and external customers going through that.
Massively.
Really interesting.
I think some of the things is about getting the culture right, because ultimately you've got, you know, two different forces coming at it from different angles. Now, fortunately, you know, CPL is an organisation which I feel does things, you know, has got a heart. You know, a lot of the initiatives and the way that we like to work with our clients is with a huge amount of compassion, but also where, you know, we really want to try and build out relationships for the long term. So in terms of what we can offer service-wise, it's vast. Very much in terms of, you know, getting to know the Ntrinsic guys. Obviously, those guys come from, you know, huge, you know, experience as well. So it's just trying to kind of find a halfway house. And I think that's what's important, you know, in terms of the culture that you then drive forward and you build upon. You know, we're scaling at the moment. So at the moment, we've hired a couple of principals, particularly on the data side of things, and again, into cybersecurity. So in terms of how we continue to scale and grow this thing, you know, we still need seniors at this stage, I feel. But then, you know, in the future, we will look to more juniors as time goes on. So
I mean, effectively, if we were to analogize it, which I always do, I'm quite a visual person. It's basically you bring into together, you know, two cultures that are very symbiotic, clearly symbiotic.
Yeah, definitely.
Everybody seems to have respect for each other, but actually, in order to, I guess, if you would think of it as two constructions, it's two houses that have been brought together, and actually you're building I guess, a mezzanine floor over it with principal consultants, and then you can continue to grow and to build on that. I think it's really interesting. I think, you know, it terrifies people when, you know, I've spoken to people literally this week who are in the, you know, they're in consultant roles and they're watching their businesses merge, and, you know, that they're maybe being acquired by a larger group, and they're terrified. But I think that comes down to communication. And it sounds like, as a business, that it sounds like you've used the word culture, but, you know, it sounds like it's quite an open culture, that you're setting
very
expectations.
much so.
We're not trying to replace you.
No.
Together.
You know what? It's also just spending time with each other, you know, and that's why I think, you know, getting into the office and kind of wanting to spend that time and really understand and work out what people are about, what people's strengths are, weaknesses, and particularly where people want to go, in either businesses, in terms of maybe where they've got to in their career, and perhaps, seeing it as a real opportunity. I mean, we've seen it as a huge opportunity for what we can, the services that we can actually give to our clients. But I know that a lot of the team are seeing it as, huge opportunities for what they can discover new that they've not done before, but particularly, how they can continue to grow.
Yeah, I just want to put a pin in what you just said there. I'm picking up on something you just said there about being in the office. So being contrary, is that not feasible if companies are maybe, been remote or have been hybrid? Do you think it's more problematic to, I guess, immerse yourself in a culture if you are not present in the office?
I think you just got to work harder. I mean, if I even have to take it back to COVID times, how hard we had to work to maintain, some kind of culture. I remember celebrating my 40th birthday online.
Happy birthday.
With everybody. Thank you. At that time, in 2020 in March, and we were all on, Zoom, Teams, whatever it was, as much as we could. So, I don't think it's impossible, but obviously, there's nothing like when you are, physically there, because also just in terms of how people are, it's all the stuff that
behaviors, it's the human interaction. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm a real empath, and as soon as you took us back to March 2020, I honestly had this massive bubble of anxiety of how hard it was, how you had to be on Zooms all day. It was exhausting, and I've only got a small team, but you are on the phone all day, and you checking in and how you're doing, and you're speaking about this client, you're speaking about this candidate. I mean, we are a remote business, but we are very small. We're a boutique business of 3. But I think, and it's something that I've talked about with many guests this year, and I know that we will continue to talk about going forward, because what is the right thing to do? And I do genuinely stand by, it depends on your business, it depends on your culture, it depends on your people. But 100%. Generally speaking, because I listen to, and I know we talked about this offline, I listen to a lot of podcasts, particularly around workplace culture, because it really interests me, especially Bruce Daisley's Eat, Work, Sleep, Repeat. He came on my show in 2022. So he's the ex-CTO of Google and YouTube. So and he invites on the most amazing people from across workplace culture, like the real occupational specialists, and they're amazing. And generally speaking, we are more productive and happier when we are physically with people, because that's what human beings do. We generate energy off each other. It doesn't mean all the time, by the way. You can blend it. But it means that from for leaders listening, and for those that are listening who maybe are, wondering why they're being called back into the office, there is a reason for that. Because actually, you think about how hard you worked in 2020. I bet you work less hours commuting into an office than you did when you were at home.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the benefits are huge, and if you look at the seismic shift just in the working culture in that time, we're talking something that might have happened that would have taken, I think, probably 10 years or more to really.
Without
I guess the thing that worries me is, obviously, when we do speak to clients, is kind of getting that balance right. And again, I think what you said there is right. You've got to find a balance for what works for you, and that's only something that you can kind of do with your team and with how you like to work. I speak to people, and there's a chap I spoke to yesterday, and he's looking out because the moment they're in 5 days a week in the city, and as much as there's opportunities, people coming at him all the time, that actually you could be there 3 days a week, but it might mean that you can then take your daughter to school, or you can
or go to the gym,
or go to the gym, or
put a wash on before you start work at 8.
Whatever it is.
I agree totally, and I always say, it is the most asked question of any of my clients, and it is the most talked about thing on the podcast. If I was to take one fundamental common theme over the last 3 years. However, what you've said there is right. I don't think it's one size fits all. I think you have to look at your ROI on your people. You have to look at where you're going, what your goals are, what your values are. And this does lead really nicely actually into, what we're going to talk about today, which, nobody has a crystal ball. I wish we did. Actually I don't.
Only.
No, I kind of don't, because then I'm quite an impulsive person, really. I think a lot of recruiters are, aren't we? We're salespeople. So as we record this now, we are in the final quarter of 2023. Set the scene. How's 2023 been for you, both internally as a business, but also externally? And then we'll talk around where you think we're heading in 2024.
We've had to pivot, and I think we've had to be adaptable as much as anything in this year. I think Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we've gone through shifts in the team and what have you.
Yeah.
But I think also in terms of, we've had to do a lot of real sort of thinking about who we are and what we're actually trying to put out there. So as much as anything, just even in terms of, our offerings, what we're trying to go to market with, are there services or solutions that that would be a benefit to our clients beyond just contract or permanent recruitment?
Yep.
We run a payroll solution for a global electronics company. We've been doing that now for the last couple of years, and that's something particularly next year that we're going to be pushing a lot more. But particularly, the conversations that we've been having with some businesses where maybe they've got a lot of contractors, and perhaps they might be looking at the risk across their supply chain. The solution we've got, is something that we run at scale. We've run it here, we've run it in Ireland, huge multinational companies where we're payrolling hundreds of people at any one time. That's something that we've seen to be a real backbone for what we've had this year. I think in terms of as an actual unit, though, coming back to your question, I think we've had to really move away from the kind of delivery. I mean, we were very lucky. Okay, and when I moved to this organization coming out of COVID, very lucky coming to CPL because we're fortunate to work with huge organizations in Ireland particularly, and some of the UK work that was presented to us was scaling by 50, 60, 80 heads at any one time. So our unit was very much delivery focused. It was I was brought in as a partnership manager. So my job was very much on that client piece and looking at how we could then develop that opportunity and really kind of embed ourselves against the business. Coming away from that this year, as I'm sure many of the people that you've been speaking with, Laisha, is the fact that we've had to be more adaptable because you can't just rely on that as a business. And as lucky as we've been in having these huge accounts, we've had to kind of, like I say, take stock and kind of really look at, okay, if we're going to merge two businesses, but if we're going to really have some kind of offering which is going to be valuable for the clients that we're working with, but will also have some legs on it for the future, which we can actually scale as a business. We need to kind of do it properly, and that's looking really at like I was saying, bringing on board principals, those that have perhaps been in the business for a number of years, those that are well trained, those that that know how to do this, that perhaps want to be in an environment where maybe they have a bit more flexibility. We're in 2 days a week, so that's great. But also where there's maybe a greater sense of autonomy, and I think really trust in them to want to do their thing. That's what we try to provide people with.
I mean, I think it's really interesting to hear firsthand people's experience and testimony of what's really happened this year. And it is not unique to your business. And anyone listening, I very much doubt you've been in a different position. It has been a very challenging year, and it was expected. We kind of expected it post-COVID, and it didn't happen. Obviously, we then had the fake boom, but it wasn't fake. It was very real.
No, it was.
Everybody cashed in on the incredible government-led schemes, the furlough schemes, the bounce back loans, which ensured that people didn't lose their jobs. However, it was a bit of a house of cards for a lot of sectors. And obviously we then saw, people, the cost of living crisis, the technology bubble burst. We had a very inflated and rather bloated, not a very nice word to use, but rather bloated sector. And I think what you said there is absolutely right, that, as a business, you've, internally looked at, where that business is coming from and how you can then scale it going forward. So I think a lot of listeners will be very reassured to hear that what you're saying is probably the case for, I would say, most of the recruitment industry. And of course, the reason that I wanted to contextualize it is because we now want to be in a position as we look ahead that we've got the right pillars in place to ensure that we thrive in 2024. So what do you see when you're forecasting as a business? What do you see will happen over that? I mean, it's so hard. I think COVID blew any kind of 5-year plans out the water. Let's face it. Let's say 12 months. What do you think the trends will be for the next 12 months?
Trend for the next 12 months, I think that, certainly we're seeing from our clients a real desire to want to consume data from us. I think that's and so particularly to have insights from us, particularly around things like whether it might be initiatives that are important to them around D&I, but particularly looking at, I think, data-driven solutions, I think is going to be one of the real things that kind of kicks on a lot more.
I agree.
I think, in terms of companies and their our databases, our networks are going to be really, really important, because that's where we derive a lot of value going into businesses. We're a 30-year-old business with a 30-year-old database. It's really, if you can mine it effectively, to get the candidates that you need, and if you're working in the right markets, that you'll have those specialists at the at your fingertips. That's where the value is. So, but I think certainly from a data perspective, that's important. I mean, we've been using a platform called PitchBook Data this year, which I don't know if any of your other interviewers have utilized. It's incredible. It's got to give a shout to those guys in terms of it's a platform which, if you're targeting particularly businesses that may be going through early phases, it breaks down not just sector by sector, but you can get a real sense of where businesses might be on a funding level. So if you're going in really early on and you want to have a snapshot, to give you a really informed meeting, it's excellent. It's really transformed some of the meetings that we've had. But it's also in this whole period that I've sort of mentioned about trying to understand what we're about, who we are, what are we, what value are we trying to put out there to people. It's really helped us really crystallize places that we want to do business, but really that when we've met people, it's given us a bit of a leg up. There's so much information on it. It really is. So it's an awesome platform.
So to sort of summarize your point in terms of what listeners can do, underpinning your business strategy with data is actually really essential. But if we go back a step from that means you need to have invested, if you haven't already done so, in the technology, which I think most companies, you'd have to be a serious tin pot not to have already done that. But it's making sure that you've got the capability to create that data and insights. We get asked all the time and mainly it tends to be around salaries and commission schemes. Those are the hot topics. That's what recruitment leaders want to know. But I'm really pleased that you mentioned diversity and inclusion, because I actually think that most sectors, even though we've had there's been tsunamis of redundancies which have been absolutely horrendous, particularly across talent acquisition and in tech. But there's still a talent shortage, and I think we're still going to be talking about this in a generation. In 20 years, there's still going to be a deficit. So I think I can't emphasize enough Rob's point about DEI, that's the kind of data that your clients will want to know about. And it's one of the main reasons that we partner with Inclusion Crowd, because that's exactly what they're here to create. That, as recruiters, we should be armed, we should be educated, and we should be informed on it. That's really interesting. So in terms of, where you see the market going, do you think that, and it's really hard for you to answer this wholeheartedly, but I'm going to ask you anyway, do you think that we'll still continue to be very business development driven, i.e. we won't be back to the heady days of just delivery only?
Yeah, definitely. I think you've got to. I think it's all about that. But you know what? It all feeds in like a figure of eight in any case. And I think if that means that it's people being visible and getting out there, meeting people, really trying to understand, build trust, build bridges with not just your clients but your candidates. Really, some of our team only in the last 6 months have got out and actually met people that they're working with properly, which, in many businesses they're like, what? But we've got some real junior people in our team, and that's still a new thing for them, because again, when you've got platforms like this, it's very, very easy to get a quick 15-30 minute chatting with someone. But again, the value I think that you get from actually meeting someone, I think is priceless.
It's absolutely priceless. And I think
I'm a bit old school in that respect, and I'm a real encourager for going, get out there. Because it's one of the nice things about the job is getting out and
that is the job.
That's it.
That is the job. And it's like the the old adage of picking up the phone and doing business development calls. I mean, that is the job. And I think, and I want to ask you this question, but I'm just going to put my 2 pence in first before I ask it to you. Is that we get a lot of feedback from people who are in their first recruitment job or looking to enter the industry, and we can't dress this up. The job is about business development. It is about creating relationships. It is about physically going and meeting clients if it's feasible. Obviously, if you have a global patch, it's a bit more problematic. But I always think that is the simplicity of this job. We can have all the data and all the tech, and that's what's amazing about AI. But actually, the actual job that we influence is people. And the best way to do that is meaningful relationships. So if you were to, you have now got, and you can do your best radio DJ bit here, you have got an audience here with lots of junior recruiters. What's the one piece of golden advice you would give them if they want to be like, Rob, we want to learn everything that you know in one piece of advice for next year? What's the one piece of advice you'd give an early recruiter in their career?
I think one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given myself when I first started was just to really get to know your candidates. And by that, because when I started doing recruitment, I had huge imposter syndrome. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like you think immediately when you're speaking to technical people. I've not done a computer science degree or an engineering degree or anything like that. You know, I might be really interested in the subject, but I'm not coming at it from the same angle as them. So I had a huge imposter syndrome. But then one of the best pieces of advice I was given was get out there, meet someone, but particularly someone that you think will actually, you know, get them a bite to eat or a drink perhaps, but someone that will actually be kind enough to actually go through the nuts and bolts of what that job is like. What does it actually entail? What does it mean, you know, to be a database administrator or, you know, an infrastructure engineer or any part of it? You know, what does that mean? What are they thinking about day in, day out? What are the kind of routines within the job? What are the some of the pet hates? What are some of the kind of slightly laborious parts of the job? What are the things they really look forward to? But just the really, you know, what do you like and what do you not like? I heard on one of the other podcasts, you know, I think that's a really great question about what do you not like. Just that
Thank you for bringing that up.
Sense of that. I think it's a great question, and I think you know, in terms of really, getting to grips with what people are about. In what can seem a complete world away from folks, you know. I
absolutely echo
engineering. What's that about? You know, if you come from a completely different,
how does it work?
How does it work? How does it work? You know, Christ, like what, you know, they're coders, so how do I communicate with them? Well, you just
ask them.
You do this.
How do you do it?
They're people, so
it's the best advice you could have actually answered that question with, because coming as somebody that I started my recruitment career in engineering, and to this day I still, you know, I'm not an engineer. I am definitely not an engineer. I'm a creator. I'm not an engineer at all. And I started my recruitment career, and that's exactly what I did. And I would invite engineers in. I didn't have a clue what they were talking about, and they'd be drawing things.
Yeah.
Because you know what, guys, people like to talk about what they do, and you know what, you're not going to get everyone giving all that information, but you only need a handful of people, because the fact that you're listening, you're interested in them, you're building trust. You mentioned that before. Secondly, you know, you're not trying to do it to get anything from them. Don't do it from I'm going to try and place them. It's just, I'm really interested to understand what you actually do. I'm so curious. What do you mean by that? And there is nobody on earth that won't help you. And that's why we have to move away from this concept that we just take a CV and we just, you know, use the Boolean searching and we're just matching them up to a job, and it's all really cold and there's no involvement, there's no engagement. Those recruiters and that style of recruitment, I actually think that boat has now sailed this year. Thank God. So everything you've said there, and that's fun.
Yeah.
I still remember this aerospace engineer coming in to interview with me, and he designed the windows in the aeroplanes. And I still promise to say, I mean, he basically was trying to simplify it for my little brain. And it's basically denim.
Yeah, wow.
It's denim. And even I was on a plane last week and I'm looking at these windows thinking that's denim. I don't think it is anymore. Who knows? But you will be so fascinated, because that's where you'll get your passion. That's where you'll get to know. And those, you might never place those people, but I tell you what, they will be.
You'll remember them.
They'll be your advocates, but they'll be your advocates.
Yeah.
They'll remember that. They'll go, do you know what? I remember Rob. He was brilliant. He was really interested in me. He didn't place me, but do you know what? Give him a call.
Yeah.
That's how you build your network. I love that piece of advice. Before we let you go
on.
In your spare time, you mentioned at the start you're a DJ.
Yes.
So, you know, is this something that's gonna, you know, take over?
No, it used to before. So before I came to recruitment, I used to be an actor, and I was so it was that and DJing. So it went hand in hand. So it meant I could go to castings in the week because I was working essentially at night, which was great. 4 nights, 5 nights a week.
Love it.
But obviously, you know, I got to my 30s and it just wasn't sustainable. You know, I had an amazing, you know, time doing it. Trained at a great place, worked with amazing people.
Wow.
Had some real, you know, great pieces of work, but needed a proper job.
It's a great background. I've always thought drama and performance is a great background for recruitment. I'm really interested to get to know people. I knew you'd be fantastic, and that was before I knew you were an ex-performer. So there you go. You have been And absolutely, like, and what I love
bless you.
is you've indicated it a couple of times, Rob is actually a listener and a fan. So
I love it. I love this podcast.
Nice to come on, to have people come on that actually do listen. So it's been an absolute joy. And obviously people will want to connect to you, which I hope that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course. More than happy to. Yeah, definitely.
Particularly because you're looking
100%.
Oh, it's been so nice to get to know you. Thank you for joining
lovely.
us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. Thank you.
Thanks.